In this video, I will share a bit about Paul Bogle, Jamaica's second national hero. Well, he can also be considered the third because, in 1965, when the country celebrated the centenary of the Morant Bay Rebellion, both George William Gordon and Paul Bogle were declared national heroes on the same day. Therefore, George William Gordon can be considered the second, depending on how you choose to place them. Paul Bogle was born into slavery. There are no records of his date of birth and very little information about his early years. Additional information about Paul Bogle was unearthed in 1866 when the Jamaica Royal Commission was established to inquire into the Morant Bay Rebellion. The commissioners interviewed some 140 persons living in Stonygut and the neighboring districts who knew Paul Bogle, and it is from these interviews that much of the information we now have about Bogle was obtained. The responses of persons interviewed in the parish of St. Thomas support the claim by some historians that Bogle was born around the year 1820. This would make him about 5 years younger than George William Gordon. The young Bogle was unknown outside of his community, in Stonygut, a settlement 4 miles from Morant Bay in the parish of St. Thomas in the east. St. Thomas is located in southeastern Jamaica. It was originally named St. Thomas in the East to distinguish it from another parish named St. Thomas in the Vale, which is located in the central part of the island. Over time, the "in the East" part was dropped from the name, and the parish became known simply as St. Thomas. St. Thomas in the Vale was in the center of the island in Middlesex County but was abolished in 1866 when it was merged into St. Catherine Parish. In the years after emancipation in 1838, a number of the newly freed Africans in St. Thomas were able to buy land, with a few of them becoming substantial landowners and relatively well-to-do, owning horses, pigs, poultry, and comfortable clothing. Paul Bogle, it seems, was a member of this elite, for as a young man he was a substantial farmer growing sugar cane, and had just started growing cotton when the Morant Bay Rebellion broke out. The most reliable description we have of Paul Bogle's physical features is that which appeared in the Colonial Standard of October 28, 1865. The Colonial Standard was a newspaper. It was a publication that existed during the colonial period in Jamaica. Paul Bogle, who was already 45, was wanted by the authorities for his involvement in the Morant Bay Rebellion. Therefore, the authorities put out a warrant in the newspaper for his arrest. The warrant described him as a very black man, with shining skin bearing heavy marks of smallpox on his face and more especially on his nose, teeth good, large mouth with red thick lips, about 5 feet 8 inches in height, broad across the shoulders, carries himself indolently, and has no whiskers. Carries himself indolently suggests that someone is moving or behaving in a lazy, sluggish, or idle manner. The description, in the warrant for Bogle's arrest, hardly matches the features in the photograph officially used to represent the national hero. In 1964, Edna Manley, the celebrated Jamaican sculptor, was commissioned by the government to create a statue of Bogle to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Morant Bay Rebellion of 1865, which Paul Bogle had led. After interviewing an old woman whose father had known Bogle well, Edna Manley's artistic intuition was that the official photograph was not a true representation of the man described to her, and she chose to use Paul Bogle's grandson, Philip Bogle, as her model for the statue. On October 18, 1865, the Colonial Standard carried notice of a reward of £2,000 for Paul Bogle's capture. Once the reward was posted, Bogle kept moving from house to house in the Stonygut area. Soldiers and the Maroons were hunting Paul Bogle down with instructions from Governor Eyre. On October 23, Paul Bogle was captured by the Maroons as he emerged from the bushes on the road between Torrington and Stonygut. He was taken to Morant Bay and was hanged 2 days later on October 25. According to an eyewitness, Bogle went calmly and bravely to his death. You could say that the Maroons were sometimes used by the colonial authorities to achieve their goals, even if it meant working against their own interests or the interests of their community. For example, the Maroons used Cat 09 to flag over 80 people who were a part of the Morant Bay Rebellion before shot them to death, then buried them under a tree. Yes, the Maroons did it. Well, I said all that just to say this isn't Paul Bogle. However, based on the description given on the warrant for his arrest, he may somewhat resemble this AI-generated image.